In this video, we're going to take a look at Lamy Crystal Obsidian. Let's jump straight to the end with my opinion. The deep undertones of green and purple that this ink has leads to a super dark black ink in all of its writing. It has absolutely no tone variation ever, and no shading at all, ever. This is a perfect black ink. Now, I'm not in general a fan of Lamy inks. This is a great one, head and shoulders above their standard black, which is a black ink. For me, while I use a bunch of black inks, and I do tend to have a black that I really like, I'm willing to seek out a bottle of this ink because it just performs so well and it looks so good on the page. If you use a lot of black inks, this one right here really is a must try. You really need to get a sample of this and see how well it does no matter what pen you put it into. And you'll see when we do some of the writing samples, I made a particular pen choice that I thought was going to expose any weakness this ink had. And I was wrong. So, I look at it and say, black's not my color to run to. I do use a fair amount of black ink, so a bottle I will easily use up. And this one's just, wow, such a good black that needs more attention. I like to change things up by using a different pen each day. Today that pen is a Hero 7035 with a fine nib. It's inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. To see how I arrived at that opinion, let's take a look at the first writing sample done on Clairfontaine. The medium is the same tone as the fine, with no feathering, no spreading, no shading, beautiful black ink on the page. On the white paper, really steps up. Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, no shading, a perfect dark black performance. And this is going to be a really boring review because the ink is that good. I was a little disappointed because I thought I was going to expose its underbelly, and I didn't. This is just that good. Looking at the back of the page, we see that we get minor ghosting and no bleeding. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Lamy All-Star with a fine nib. A Cross Bailey with a medium nib. A Duke 209 with a Fude nib. The next writing sample is done on Leuchtterm 1917 paper. Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, no shade, solid black all the way, solid performer, looking really good here. The medium is the same tone as the fine, with no feather, no spread, no shade, beautiful black, solid lines all the way. The Fude nib has no feather, no spread, no shade, nice dark black this entire time. I'm going to take a moment and say one of the things that's very interesting about a Fude nib is if you intentionally write a little bit faster and a little bit, I'm going to call it messier, you really can take advantage of the brush-like stroke of a Fude nib, which is what I was playing at doing in my writing here. Looking at the back of the page, we get a normal amount of ghosting and no bleed through because it's a well-behaved ink. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The next writing sample is done on Moleskine paper. Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, no shade, easy read, very nice ink. The medium has some tiny feathers that are occurring on it. I haven't had a lot of that on this paper. When you look at on the second line, another comes up, and the TH both have a little bit of some feathers, just some tiny ones. But that's about all that I see on this page. And I took a few extra minutes here to make sure I could find them if they were there. It's beautiful though. The Fude nib did expose a little bit of an issue with this paper. Now, it is very wet and putting down a lot of ink. So we do get some feathering, and I wanted to make sure that what I was seeing was feathering and not, I'm going to call it almost splashing from the nib. But it does feather. You see it in Prince, you see it in Nassau, you see it in Scent and Little. It's all over. There's a faint bit of spread, but this is a Fude nib after all. Looking at the back of the page, we get a normal amount of ghosting and no bleed through. Despite how much ink was being put down with the Fude, it still didn't come through. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. This smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. And here we see the results of the resistance test. The next writing sample is done in a composition notebook. Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, we get no spread, we get no shading. We still have a very dark black ink. Where this paper is known to make an ink look a bit more dull, here it didn't do it. This ink defeated how this paper frequently dulls an ink. And now I like this paper and I use it a lot. And I deal with the fact that it's going to dull and ink up a little bit, but not this one, which is kind of what makes me think I might be willing to pick up a bottle. The medium nib is the same tone as the fine, with no feather, no spread, no shade, beautiful black ink on the page the whole way. The Fude nib, same tone as the medium and the fine, with no feather, no spread, no shading. The spots that look a little weird, like the TH in mathematical, that's more an effect from the nib than that is feathering. So you just have to be aware when you're looking at something like this and using an oddball nib that sometimes things will look a little different, but they're supposed to. Looking at the back of the page, a normal amount of ghosting, really not bad at all, and no bleed through whatsoever. With over 1,000 inks reviewed, let's take a look at some color comparables. Here is Colorverse Sunspot. Here is Krishna Empty. Here is Noodler's X Feather. Here is Pilot Bamboo Coal. The next writing sample is done in a Mead 5-star notebook. Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, good solid black the whole way through, performing really well. The medium is the same tone as the fine, with no feather, no spread, no shading, nothing. Just a beautiful black ink. Wow, almost lost my words. The Fude nib on the bottom has no feather, no spread, Really shocking. I was expecting some feathering here with it. It didn't do it. So the paper's holding up really well, and the ink's performing beyond expectation. No shading whatsoever. I thought that Fude was going to get it, and it didn't. Looking at the back of the page, we do see a couple spots where it went deeper into the page, but it's not coming through the page. It is not touching the page underneath. It is giving a normal amount of ghosting. While it's nice to find other inks in the same color family, I prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Here is a blue ink by Caran d'Ache, their Chromatics Idyllic Blue. Here is a red ink by Diamine, their Ruby Red. Here is a magenta ink by KWZ, their Maroon. Here is a yellow ink by Pen BBS, their number 184. If you'd prefer different complement colors, then there's links to those different playlists down in the description. Or you can click on my face. That'll take you to my channel page. Then click on the playlist tab. Scrolling down, you'll be able to see all of the playlists that are here on the channel. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper. Looking at the fine nib, we get a tiny bit of feathering. You see it in the LD of soldier. You see it in the word become, but not too bad, really. Very under control feathering here. A little bit of spread, not too bad. The medium is the same tone as the fine. It does have some tiny feathering that is occurring. Not bad. It does have a little bit of spread. Not bad. It does not have any shading. It gives a good solid black tone the entire time. The Fude nib is the same tone as the medium and the fine. It has a tiny bit of feathering. Not bad at all. Really very under control here for what I expected. I thought this nib was going to absolutely molest this paper, and it didn't. And I hope that word didn't just destroy the video. Beautiful performance. It's nothing. It didn't bother it one bit. Looking at the back of the page, we see that we got no bleed through that touched the page underneath. We did get quite a bit of show through going on. Yes, it's very deep into the paper. Yes, it's very cheap paper, so we expect these sort of things. So what nib and pen do I think is going to give the best writing experience with this ink? What can I say for a nib and pen here? I mean, I tried to exploit a weakness. I tried to bring out a failing of this ink. I don't normally go out of my way to do it. I did here because I hate Lamy inks. Not really, but I'm just not in general a fan. And yet, this is still a dealer's choice. It always performed perfectly, giving a nice solid black, even from the Fude nib, which I was expecting it to have a bit of a problem. It didn't. Always a good solid black the whole way through. It's so deep and dark on bright white paper. It looks like you can fall into your letters. A beautiful ink. I hope you got something out of this video, and if it leads to you wanting to try this ink, when you purchase it, let the retailer know where you heard about it, whether it's me or any other channel. Thanks for watching.